Okay, we are back. True Detective, Night Country Season 4, Part 5. As Cameron mentioned, the penultimate episode of the season, written by a slew of people: Katrina Albright, Winona Wilms, Chris Mundy, and Issa Lopez. This one also directed by Issa Lopez. She's directed each episode this season. There's a lot here, Cameron. Where this is going to be either this or the Super Bowl halftime show is going to be longer. Let's see how this recap goes.
All right.
It is now we've jumped to about New Year's Eve in Ennis, whereas in the last episode we were on Christmas Day. Evangeline Navarro is collecting her sister's ashes after the suicide. She and Rose go out to the frozen sea, decide to crack open the ice and pour them in, which they will revisit later in the episode. While this is going on, Liz Danvers decides to visit Otis Heiss, who apparently was taken into custody and put into a rehab facility of some kind. We had questions about that last week. She insists that he has to help them find the entrance to the cave where Annie was killed. Danvers, even at one point later in the episode, agrees to get him back on heroin if he will come help them find the entrance to those caves and be their guide. Meanwhile, Kayla kicks Pete Pryor out of the house. She's just frustrated with how much time he is spending at work. While he's bouncing around between folks, he does uncover that the Tuttle organization, brought up back a few episodes ago, is funding not only the Silver Sky Mine, but also the Salal Research Station. And there's a connection here because Salal is apparently providing pollution reports which falsely show the Silver Sky is not doing things to the water and to the land of Ennis. At the mine's offices, Leah takes part in another protest, this one quite violent. She gets beaten by a police officer before Navarro intervenes. Danvers, this time, thinks she should spend some time in jail and leaves her there until Navarro breaks her out, as it were. Eventually, Danvers goes and confronts Kate about not just the protest, but also the funding concerns that Pete came up with. She and Connolly basically shut her down, saying that the case of the Salal men is closed because the forensics have revealed that a weather event caused their death. Reluctantly, Danvers decides to stop pursuing things, but then we see Kate meet up with Hank, where the two of them discuss the death of Annie. Hank claims he did not do it, but did move her body. Danvers visits the bodies of stillborn babies and others that have been killed by the pollution from the mine, which prompts her to keep going, keep investigating, keep pursuing these leads for the things that they've been working on. So she breaks Otis out of the rehab facility, takes him back to her house, gives him the heroin. But before they can leave, Hank has been following them, shows up, kills Otis, turns the gun on Danvers. But Pete, his own son, pulled the trigger on him, killing him before he can do anything. And then at the end of the episode, Danvers, Pete, and Navarro agree to cover this up so they can keep investigating. Wow, that was a penultimate episode. A lot there. We've had quite a few things uncovered, but boy, now we got some big leaps to take into part 6.
Yeah, indeed. And quite a lot kind of happens at the end,
Yes.
with that whole kind of showdown where Hank wants to take Otis with him, which Kate has ordered slash coerced him into taking care of this problem. Um, he ends up shooting Otis. Otis is going to run away, I guess, right? It wasn't like his intention was to kill Otis. But
Yeah.
yeah, more shockingly, I think, that Pete kills him. And there is, despite all of that thorough recapping, just good job that you did. There is something related to that you didn't hit on, right? Which
I'm
is
glad
that,
I'm glad you're bringing this up. Yes.
yeah, which is that Connolly knows what happened in the Wheeler case and putting things together. Danvers surmises, right? That Connolly knows because Pete figured it out and Hank got on Pete's computer to get the information that Pete had figured out, right? And fed it to Connolly. And Connolly uses that when push comes to shove to tell her, you need to, stop looking into um, Annie's death and everything else, right? But the fact that Pete knows that his father has done this and really kind of
Mhm.
betrayed him, um, in a sense, I think does factor into his decision to pull the trigger.
I completely agree. I could not agree with you more. And that Pete knows going into that situation, Danvers and Varro have been about that cover up life before, and he says, "I'm going to step into that world as well." And Navarro is trying to convince Danvers to go through with this plan, and Pete is the one that says, "She's right. Let's do it. You guys go. I'll clean. I'll take care of it." So he is just as complicit, obviously, as them beyond just pulling the triggers. They're going to try to cover this up and keep going.
Yeah. So I guess they're going to go. The plan is to go throw the bodies in the ice, go throw them in the
Yeah.
sea,
Yeah,
something
that was
like
the yeah,
that.
that's right. That's the revisit the place where Rose and Navarro were. They tell him to go find Rose, to take her to where her sister is, and they're going to dispose of the bodies there, I guess, dumping them in the ice. I mean, sure, that's a good place to dump them. You got a whole house full of evidence there. You got to figure out what to do with
Yeah,
though.
you got to clean, you got to clean up a good amount of blood.
Some
And is
heroin
it a
burning
good
in the
place?
bathroom.
Is it the because it's a good place to dump them? Except there was also the bit where Navarro was at risk of falling through the ice.
Yeah,
So
that's
like
true.
you got to be real careful if you're going to do this.
Well, the ice is already cracked. Now you got to do is just toss the bodies over there. They're going to fall right through the
You just
ice.
slide them. You
Yeah,
just
you just
you
slide.
know get a good running start and just slide the body to the ocean. It's like curling and it goes and then like imagine it just like stops right by the water. You're like, oh no, you can still see it. Now what? Get a big stick. Anyway, I'm joking. I don't know if we'll see all of that or what
Yeah,
in the finale, but things are definitely going down. One big question that I have, um, well, wait, I guess first let's talk through the stuff with Connolly and Kate
yeah.
and Hank.
So I get it's not. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not explicitly stated that Conley and Kate are in cahoots about this stuff,
Correct.
but clearly Kate and Hank are. I think we can put pieces together that show that the three of them are working together somehow because it is Conley that directs the "you're shut down because this was an event. Case is closed."
Yeah, I do think it's something of a question with Connolly.
Yeah,
Um, to start with Hank and Kate, you know, um, the show just gives us a scene of them talking like we did the murder,
yes, yes,
but not quite. As you said, Hank does insist in the closing scene. He tells Danvers and et al. That he didn't kill Annie, he just moved the body.
right.
Um, so if we believe him there, which I guess I do, tying that back to the scene with Kate, the implication is that someone else had done this,
Yeah,
and then Kate brought Hank in to cover up what actually happened, move the body to the second location, and promised him that he would get to be police chief. That
that
didn't work out
yeah.
because Danvers got sent to town and so.
That's exactly my read on it. That moved Annie to a place where it looks like, some mine worker or local beat her to death, because of her role in the protests and in sort of fighting the mine. And that very well may have been what happened in the caves, but we don't know exactly what happened there. We don't know
Right.
who done it. We don't know the circumstances that led to that. Just that somehow Kate, Hank, and some other person were involved in that death.
Yeah, there's an implication then that changing the location of the body gets in the way of the investigation, right? So they can't solve the case and so on. And Kate does seem to think that if they find the cave, if they get in there, they found it, they just couldn't get in,
Yeah.
right? Because the entrance had been collapsed. She seems to think if they get in there, they're going to be able to figure things out. And that is my big question coming out of the episode. It's like, what
You're
could
you're
they
you're
possibly
skeptical.
find in there 6 years
Navarro does
after
at
the
one point say, maybe we find a weapon, maybe we find DNA. I'm not so sure what you could find after 6 years in an ice cave, but yeah, color me skeptical as well, I think.
yeah, I really at a loss. the best I've got is that they could find whatever it was Annie found,
Hmm.
and that what Annie found was real bad for the mind, you
Yeah.
know. And how does this relate to what happened to Otis back in 1998? I think they said in this episode he says 30 years ago. That would not be quite
Yes.
30 years ago. 26 years ago.
Yes. I believe his injury report states that it happened in 1998. How that's related to Annie, what happened to her, I don't necessarily know that there is one, other than just they both discovered something at
Yeah.
at the same location, and it, whatever it is, managed to kill Annie, or it was involved in Annie's death, and it injured Heiss. But yeah, it's many years apart.
Many years apart. There's at least the strong suggestion that what happened to Otis and what happened to the Slaw researchers was maybe the same because their injuries were the same.
Yeah. Although completely different locations, as I believe is correct. Otis happened in the cave, he indicates, or at the cave. The Salamen are out just in the middle of the tundra, middle of the sort of barren
Yeah.
Alaska land. So I'm not, what could that have been? I'm not sure. And it doesn't look like, based on the injuries, that's what happened to Annie. So there's still this sort of mysterious, how do these things connect, and what happened to the Salamen? Are they at all connected to Annie? And I don't think we heard the name Raymond Clark one time this episode. So what role does he come back in and play? I think that was a little bit of a, let's push you through a door and hope you forget about it until it come back
Yeah.
around.
And what's he up to? Last episode, Otis said he was in the night country.
Yep.
We have the indication in this episode that the night country refers to these caves underneath the ice, or, you know, whether that's what Otis meant or not,
Yeah,
he doesn't
exactly.
remember saying that.
And is what he would describe as a night country the same on heroin versus off heroin? We don't know, I guess, at this point. I
No,
never will know.
he's dead. Yeah, so we're gonna not get any more information from Otis. But I think it's is it Kavik who says this about he says that the stone with the spiral
Yes.
it used to mark thin spots on the ice or whatever,
Yeah, it was a friend
something
of
like
Cabot's,
that.
looked like, came in and said, "Oh, my dad used to show me these. This is what they would mark these and put them near places of danger."
Yeah, which okay.
Yeah. So
So
that still
that
doesn't
and
explain
then
what the spiral is and what it does and why it's
so
prevalent everywhere.
so how wild we were talking about theories,
Yeah.
speculations for the finale. How wild can I get, Ryan? How wild is this show gonna get? How like supernatural? Because part of me is sitting here saying, okay, I got it. In
Yeah.
that cave, there is a um cold ice monster made of darkness that scared Annie
Yeah.
and killed her.
Yeah.
And but it came out of the cave and scared the Salal guys. And like Kate
I,
knows about it, and
you know, I my thinking on this has shifted a little bit to where I almost think the show is less supernatural and much more horror now. We saw this a little bit in the last episode, not as much in part five, but it seems to be that I still think that all of the visions, all of the scary moments, all of the people that we're seeing are still through the lens of the Navarro sisters, right?
mm-hmm.
So that can be justified away by their history of hallucinations and seeing things. I think that we see Navarro see Annie at the protest in this episode, right?
Yep.
Sees her standing there before she kind of disappears, washes away. So is there still a sort of supernatural explanation for the Slawman? I don't know, because it seems to be narrowing in on just what these sisters experience.
Yeah, but again, so what's in the cave? If you don't
Yeah.
like my ice monster theory, like what could they find in the cave? I feel like whatever they could find in the cave, and presumably will find in the cave, because
Yeah.
I would guess that's how this is going to wrap up, right? Kate's worried about it, so it has to somehow connect up and provide some explanation. And I would expect that explanation to link what happened to Annie K. I guess probably what happened to Otis
Yeah.
prior to that, what happened to the Salah men, um, and maybe the water pollution.
Hmm. Okay, so this is a thought I had, and I've been thinking about this since this will tie in just for those that need it a little bit of season one, ending of season one. So there was a comment on the piece I wrote last week about, someone that loves season one but was disappointed when they gave it a terrestrial resolution, right? There wasn't something more mysterious or supernatural that were defined that.
Yeah,
I still am of the opinion that the show will not explain much, if at all, anything at all, about the supernatural elements because they want those to continue as some sort of theme throughout different different seasons. I do wonder if that has going to have to do with this Annie, the mine, the research station, Raymond connection. Annie found something out. Raymond has been activated by someone, Kate or someone, to do something to her. There's a risk of all of their lives and their careers collapsing. Again, that still doesn't explain what happened to the men. Doesn't explain that she's awake, but I, I, I just still think that we're headed towards the puzzle pieces fit to solve the mystery, but we're still leaving some things out there that will keep you thinking about what these forces could have been that compelled the real life solution to be there.
right. Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the darkness monster is female, of
Oh,
course,
okay,
right?
okay.
Yeah, it's she. They woke her up. She's awake, and
I see. Okay.
right. Kind of no,
Well,
but
I think you found it. Yeah.
honestly, I tend to agree with you. I tend to expect that we're not going to dive headlong into the supernatural for an explanation.
Yeah.
What it might end up being that would do the work narratively, I have little guess about because I think it
Yeah.
does have to do that level of work, right? Like Danvers and Navarro get into that cave and they find something that allows us and them to
Hmm.
piece everything together. And maybe it doesn't fully explain what seems to be supernatural and spooky and okay, right? As you say, that's kind of left a little bit unresolved
Right.
as a question, without reducing it away, but without, yeah. But I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. What could they find in that cave?
Yeah. Besides whale vertebrate, I'm not sure what they'll find.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's see. What
the,
else should we touch on? What about the anything to talk about with Leah? This has sort of
yeah,
become an interesting undercurrent of this as representative of maybe what could have happened to Annie, what is happening to these people in the town.
yeah. I started wondering if she might die.
Yeah.
Um, she takes a beating, and
Mhm.
maybe that's as far as it goes. But in them drawing that level of parallel, I think, and of course that being what Danvers is worried about, and um, she functions as a certain entry point into what's going on with the protests. I guess by the time we get to the end of the episode, I don't think that she's going to die next week. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but I
Yeah.
think that because part of what I started thinking about as this episode went along would be that remotivating Danvers about the Annie K case, but I think we've already gotten that narratively.
Yes. And
So
Leah played that role, right? I mean, it was their conversation while she's in the bathtub that helped Danvers really understand. Because earlier in the episode, I think Danvers said to Navarro, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I know that there's pollution. Yeah, 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 I get it." But then Leah puts these faces to it. There have been 9 stillborn deaths. There have been all of these sicknesses. All these things happen, and that's what prompts Danvers to go to that cemetery where they can't literally be buried yet, and they're just sitting there in boxes waiting and
yeah,
seeing those. To okay, we can't just accept the cold weather thing and move on. We have to give some more work for this.
Right. Which, circling back around, I don't know if we talked about Connolly enough and our takes on him. What I will say to kind of draw this back around is okay, so she's remotivated. They're motivated to the extent that they are going to go to that cave and continue to investigate, even though the powers that be have absolutely told them not to do that.
And it's perhaps they have to do it in an incredibly treacherous way now because they can't get in through the entrance.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So they've got to go and like make a hole through the ice, and that indicates that in all likelihood, while I would expect in the finale that they figure it out, they're not going to get official level justice,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah. I think that's right. If they're wanting to take down the whole conspiracy, that they certainly believe there is one, I don't see how that they get that kind of resolution there. I'm just not
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, the only possibility would be, I think the only possibility would hang on Conley,
Hmm.
right? So how do we think about him? One possibility is that, you know, he's the authority figure, he's the guy in charge, maybe his political aspirations. He's not really a part of a conspiracy so much as he's being played at that level to help the cover up happen.
Yes.
If that's the case, you could imagine potentially, Danvers and Navarro will figure it out and they present him with it. And he says, okay, I can't help cover this stuff up anymore. I'm having a moment of conscience. And,
Hmm.
um,
I think that we briefly touched on this, I think, last time, but I think the line where Connolly says, or maybe Danvers says, Connolly, I know you want to be mayor, but we have to do something. That one line speaks volumes about what Connolly's likely involvement is on all of this, right?
yeah,
How can this go on in my town? How can I allow this to happen and still have these, as you said, these aspirations to have this job? If they find out I'm involved, that's done. So he's completely, if not ultimately, the lead in all this cover up.
right. And that's where, when it comes down to it, I can't really see what I was just suggesting happening. It could
Yeah,
narratively, I think, like they could play it that way. They figure out the crime, they bring it to Connolly. He has that kind of moment of conscience and
yeah,
arrest Kate and shuts down the mine or whatever. But it's hard for me to imagine them doing that in the way where we would buy it.
yeah, yeah. I agree.
And that makes me think that it's not going to happen, that we're not going to get that level of happy ending.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think a happy ending is coming. I don't think a finality of in the most purest form is coming. A lot, as there does seem to be in these seasons. There's a lot of ambiguity coming.
Yeah. Like I think it's more likely that Danvers and Navarro die in the caves than that Connolly comes around and arrests Kate and shuts down the mine. I think like the
Yeah.
terribly bad ending, as it were, is more likely than the happy ending. But we'll see. We'll see.
So this episode ends. You were a teenager in the 90s, as was I. You certainly remember the song "Save Tonight" by Eagle Eye Cherry.
I almost put it in our notes.
This episode ends with a very creepy version of that song, which the lyrics are "Save tonight, fight the break of dawn, come tomorrow, tomorrow I'll be gone." As we see Danvers and Navarro drive towards the caves, that's what's playing on top of this. So
Yeah.
certainly something there, I think.
Yeah, we might read, is this foreshadowing? One of my biggest thoughts was I think I've had just about enough of slowed down covers of 90s hits. I'm getting a little worn out. I know when we were doing Fargo, I like the Toxic cover,
Yeah,
so maybe it's
yeah.
just a little bit case by case. But this one played, I was like, oh, we're doing this now?
Yeah.
What's next? Breakfast at Tiffany's? You know,
I haven't thought of Eagle Eye Cherry in 25 years, I guarantee you.
yeah, I was looking him up. Do you realize that that is his name?
Eagle Eye Cherry?
Yeah, that's that guy's name.
I had no idea.
Hmm. Go to look at
Oh
his
my gosh.
Wikipedia. Yeah.
I'm learning something new today. Okay.
Quite prolific too. Although I think basically a one-hit wonder,
Yeah, yeah.
at least in the States, um, with that song.
Incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I don't know. Things I tell you will not be
Well, we'll
wrong.
see. We'll see how
But
much that foreshadows next week. 75-minute episode next week. This is
yeah, looking
almost
forward to
movie
it.
length.
Looking forward. Very briefly, we totally skipped over this, although it's in our notes. I don't know to what degree it's worth mentioning that we skipped 6 days of time
Yeah,
between Christmas
interesting.
and New Year's Eve.
I
Any
mean, there's a
thoughts related to
very consistent 5 days of time, and then we've skipped 6 days, but clearly that cannot happen again. Clearly, we are picking up right where we left off for this finale. I can't see that being any other way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what were they doing? I don't know. Um, I guess it's fine. It's just a little bit odd to me that they have been giving us the dates and made a point of telling us that, right?
Yeah,
They necessarily
yeah.
have to tell us that, but we want you to know it's New Year's Eve now.
Well, it and you just have to throw logic out the window sometimes with these shows. In the first couple episodes, they find the corpsicle and, within an afternoon have it carved out and it's an ice rink.
Yeah,
Whereas, here at least it makes sense. Oh, Julia died. Her body has been taken to the crematorium. So 6 days later, she can get the ashes. That makes a lot more sense than, all this stuff has been processed and done. So yeah, I
I mean,
understand that, but yeah, you just super.
have we looked up how long the night should last? I ask basically, I mean, have you looked this up? Because I have not.
I have not. I remember seeing someone say it was hard to ascertain because obviously this is a fictional town. We don't know exactly the location of where this is in
We look at Barrow,
Alaska, but
Alaska.
I mean it's well past a week. Well past a week.
Yeah. I mean, I just got to wondering, is the time jump going to be because they want to line it up so that at the very end of the finale, the sun starts, dawn breaks, as it were.
Yeah. The
I
most
wonder.
northern parts of Alaska can sometimes experience up to 60 days of night.
Yeah.
Other regions have about 30 days of night.
I don't know if we're getting there then, because this
No.
has only been 2 weeks. Only been 2 weeks. That's why you creative license,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that about does it. Anything else you want to hit on this
Oh,
one?
I think that's it. Very much looking forward to what should be a long and substantive finale going into the last episode.
Yeah, we'll tie it all up. The ice monster will emerge and sing the Beatles, and every special should be like his spiral means stay away. That's what it
Yeah,
means.
I
Come
mean,
on.
we had that was the other thing. We had no Danvers past, so nothing about her son, nothing about polar bears, none of that in this episode, right? So we're just sort of leaving those threads out there too.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what gets resolved, what
Yep.
doesn't get resolved, and definitely looking forward to talking about it with you next week. So, hope everyone will continue to join us. Again, putting this episode out on the night of Friday the 9th because they're releasing this episode of True Detective on Friday the 9th in light of the Super Bowl on Sunday. And then for part 6, back to Sunday night, and we'll get the podcast together and you can keep an eye out for it after the episode is aired. Also, be sure to read Ryan's recaps on tvobsessive.com. There are other things on True Detective from some of the previous seasons. If you want to look at that, poke around the site. We got other good stuff there. Follow us on social media at TV Obsessive. Check out the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave us a good review wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next week.
All right, see you then.